Welcome to Specific Love. Today we're going to build an awesome, huge loft bed that goes with a queen mattress for a little tiny room. Let's begin. A friend of ours recently purchased a new home for his family. The floor layout is nicely done, but the bedrooms are a little smaller than they're used to. So they asked if I could build their daughter a loft bed that would hold her queen-size mattress. I was excited about this project and started designing it on SketchUp. The window, closet, and outlet locations had to be considered. I then went to the local home improvement store and purchased a bunch of lumber. Now for this project I'm going to be using just some basic pine lumber I picked up at the local hardware store. It's strong, plenty strong for this project, and since the child's going to be using this bed all the time, I don't want to invest a ton of money into, say, oak or something fancy for the bed. Over time it will get abused and it can easily be replaced with just some standard lumber. It was then time to cut everything to size, which took a bunch of time in itself. Now cutting everything to size ahead of time can sometimes be a little risky. If you need several pieces of wood that span over a distance, the sizes might vary just a little and cause the wood to be misaligned. But for this build, I had to take the risk because I needed to transport all of this wood several miles away. And the layout of the new home did not allow us to assemble much before entering the room. This setup uses a combination of 2x4s, 2x6s, 1x4s, and 3/4 inch plywood. Now as I was cutting the plywood for the desk to this bed, I was a little concerned with using my circular saw because it has a 24 tooth blade. And under normal circumstances, this could make a jagged edge. Though it was until someone suggested using tape over the cutting line. Whenever you're cutting plywood, there's always a chance for you to have a lot of sharp and jagged edges. But if you take some tape, this is just simple painter's tape, and you put it right over the area you're going to cut, so most likely you're going to come out with a nice smooth edge. After all the cuts, my wife then helped me sand down all the rough edges and labels from the factory. Now to help minimize the assembly at the new home, I was able to assemble the legs using glue and pocket screws for strength. I also inserted plugs into each of the holes to improve the appearance. My wife and I then stained the legs, box frame, and desk in a traditional cherry color. I then added a polyurethane coating to the rest of the wood to keep the natural color visible. This should protect the wood and keep future staining to a minimum. Now that we have everything cut, sanded, and stained and ready to be assembled, I gotta load this all up in my vehicle and we're gonna take it to my friend's house. And once we get there, we're gonna take all this stuff into the bedroom because unfortunately we can't really assemble anything and get it down their hallway and make the turn into the bedroom. Now as you can see, the bedroom is quite small and was a little bit of a challenge. We also had to keep much of the wood in the hallway or otherwise we would be tripping over it all day. But overall the family was excited and I enlisted the father as a second pair of hands for this build. I first laid out the box frame just to double check the dimensions, and then started with assembling these boards to each of the legs at the desired height. I wanted to minimize the visible screws, so I only added them to the inside corners of the frame. We then tried screwing the long sides of the frame to the legs, but that ended up being a problem when we tried to raise them and they came into contact with the ceiling. So we unscrewed them and raised them to the height by hand before screwing them in place. We next attached some side rails to the box frame which would hold the slats of wood that support the mattress. And in case there was any question about it, a quick test showed that the frame and legs were plenty strong for this project. And here's a little glimpse of how big this setup actually is for this room. It was now time to start adding the side rails on the back wall. These are pretty easy to attach with screws, but we just had to double check the spacing several times to make sure everything was even. We then moved it back towards the wall and the outlets were just right for access. So we finished adding the rest of the rails. Now the footer of the bed is also the stairs to the top, but only having one bias did not seem strong enough to support a growing child. So we added a couple 2x4s to that side, making sure all the rails had at least 2 screws for support. This will also give the frame more rigidity. It was now time to add a small shelf along the back side of the lower section. This plywood section is supported mainly by the existing rails, but we also added a couple L brackets to the underside to keep it from sliding out. For the backing of the shelf, I just glued another small strip of wood to the base and clamped it in place. We then attached the desk to the side closest to the window in the same fashion as the shelf, but we also added an angle support bar on one side because it did not have a railing. The support bar was attached using pocket screws on the inside to minimize them being seen. I then added 2 angle supports on the front of the bed for extra strength and rigidity of the frame when the child is moving around on the top. It was finally time to add bed slats. I only used 12 of these, which means there would be small spaces between each of them. But this will be plenty of strength to hold the mattress. And if for some reason these boards start to warp over time, they can easily be flipped over and continue to be used. And to complete the loft bed, we had to put the mattress into place, but this turned out to be a little challenging. We tried lifting the mattress over the side rail, but it would just hit the fan on the ceiling. So then we tried to lift it over the end of the bed, but there was not enough room to bend the mattress. So we ended up having to take off the top rail of the frame, slide the mattress in, and screw it back in place. And the bed was finally done. So I retrieved the new owner and allowed her to explore and have fun on her new loft bed. Now if you enjoyed this project, make sure you click the like button. Tell us what you think about it in the comments. I also have some fun projects right over here, so make sure you check those out. Otherwise, have fun building.